Hey, I'm David Adelsheim. The story of Adelsheim Vineyard began in 1971. That was the year that Ginny and I decided to risk our life savings on a piece of property in Oregon's North Willamette Valley. Looking back now, we were one of just 10 families that made wine before 1980 from grapes planted on our properties in that region. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of what became our first vineyard, we wanted to tell our story. But we quickly realized that the only way to truly tell our story was to tell the stories of that entire first generation. Our winery team proposed an idea, a series of video conversations with the founders of those first 10 wineries and me. I loved it and set to work contacting my old friends. In each interview, we wanted to go beyond their widely known histories to discover who these people really were and what led them to build our uniquely collaborative, and at least from today's perspective, incredibly successful wine industry. This is our shared story. On a Saturday afternoon in early 1975, Ginny and I were driving into Portland for some shopping when we came to a horrible realization. Having recently met Pat and Joe Campbell, we'd been invited for a meal in the house that they just finished building on the site of their newly planted vineyard. We'd been looking forward to comparing notes with the Campbells on building houses and planting vineyards. But we'd spaced out the invitation, and of course back then there were no cell phones. Chagrinned, we called from a payphone as soon as we could. Pat said, "No problem, come tomorrow instead." I remember we had rabbit. We were able to chat with Pat and Joe on a sunny October 9th, 2020, sitting in the original Elk Cove vineyard that they planted in 1974. Pat and Joe, thank you so much for letting us come to, this is the original planting, right?
Absolutely. These are
It is.
Our original vines.
46
planted
years old.
In 74.
Yep.
Pat, you grew up in the Hood River area. What was the role of wine, if there was one, in your family?
There wasn't really any role of wine in our family except for my uncle's dandelion wine, which I never tasted, but we did have a lot of farming going on. We raised apples, pears, strawberries, and so it was great fun. I got to drive the tractor and do grafting of fruit trees, and those were probably my most important jobs, but then there was pulling brush and other things as well.
Growing up on a farm like nobody else in the wine industry at the beginning,
Hard to believe.
was this something that was in the back of your mind as you and Joe were sort of deciding your way in the universe, or were you trying to get away from it, or?
Not at all. No, I definitely, when we moved back to Oregon from South Dakota in '72, that was my goal, is to somehow get into some kind of farming. And we were living in Hood River at that time, and we looked around the valley for south-facing slopes. Even in the back of our mind, we started thinking grapes, because we knew the industry was starting in the Willamette Valley.
So you were looking around Hood River.
Right.
At the beginning.
Uh-huh.
It's one thing to grow up on a farm and to be in South Dakota, and it's another thing to be looking for land to grow grapes. I mean, that isn't a necessary follow-on. What happened in there?
Well, for one thing, when we were in South Dakota, we did make wine from choke cherries and the small grapes along the creeks. And not that they were great wines or anything, but we got the idea of fermentation and how magical it was.
So I want to turn temporarily, Joe, to you and ask roughly the same questions. Where did you grow up?
In Hood River.
Did you?
Right in Hood River.
In the town?
My parents owned a small motel. It had originally 8 units. And the idea was that was my parents' work as they started into the years of retirement. It didn't work out too well. The main highway, Highway 80, bypassed Hood River. And every month, my parents would scrape together the amount of money to pay the mortgage. And so that was a big worry in my family. And I started work when we moved there in 1949, delivering newspapers. And I just added up the other day, I had 11 paid jobs before I graduated from high school. So although I didn't grow up on a farm, I learned the value of hard work.
The necessity thereof.
If I wanted to have any extra spending money. And I also worked on the farms.
Was that more in the summer or?
Yeah, in the summers or during harvest. I picked fruit, I thinned fruit. I met Pat in a strawberry patch, picking strawberries. We both were picking strawberries.
Yep.
And was that in high school or when was
that? When we first met, how old were you?
I was 9.
She was 9, I must have been 12.
But we picked strawberries in the same field.
We did.
And he and his buddies were very impressive.
So when you were 9 and you were 12, did you continue to know each other from that time on?
No. It was just that we were in the same strawberry field, and I was admiring him. And then when I was in high school and he was in college, he asked me to go out. And
my best friend was dating her older sister. And he said, hey, she has a younger sister.
Where were you going to college that it would make sense to see somebody in high school in Hood River?
Well, I went to college at Harvard, but...
that's not Harvard on the Columbia, not that one.
Yeah. But I was the first from my high school. My high school had existed for maybe 50 years. Yeah. And I was the first to ever go east of the Mississippi River in 50 years.
You were going to Harvard. You were finishing up high school. Mm-hmm. You went to college after that.
Yes.
And where did you go?
I went to University of Oregon.
That doesn't sound like an ag school.
No. I studied French and German, and I enjoyed that very much. And it came in handy later when we went to Burgundy and Champagne.
When did you get married?
We got married in 1966 in San Francisco. And
something else.
So right after college, I moved to San Francisco, and I worked at a jazz nightclub for a year and a half, which I loved. And Joe was at Stanford by that time in medical school. So his brother-in-law, he knew Joe was having problems with his marriage, and so he brought him by where I was working, and so we started dating again.
We both had prior marriages.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And I had 2 sons at that point. And they were a big part of our labor here in the vineyard during the summer.
First year these vines were planted.
Don't tell OSHA. We taught my oldest son, he was 12 years old, to drive the crawler. And he would drive the crawler through the vines, and his younger brother would water the vines out of out of a tank.
Yeah, off a tank.
Yeah.
Wow.
And following that, I had a choice. We were either going to go to Canada and try to immigrate, or I could go in the public health service and serve the Indians. And that's what I got to do.
Wow.
And that was in Pine Ridge, South Dakota.
Yeah. I understand making home wine in South Dakota. Mm-hmm. Did that just come out of nowhere? Was that because you were both hippies and you were going back to the land? And
probably the latter, yes. Yeah. At first.
Well, I wouldn't say so exactly. It's like growing up on a farm. I was always into food preservation, canning, bread making, and freezing. I actually won a trip to Chicago with a demonstration I did on freezing corn, which is pretty amazing. But anyway, so it kind of goes along with winemaking. Is like, okay, you're taking fruit, you're doing something with it to save it for later.
Yeah. You were interested in drinking this product.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. we started visiting tasting rooms around Stanford.
When you were in Stanford.
At Stanford, because we didn't have money to eat at nice restaurants in San Francisco.
Right.
And then an orthopedic surgeon who I studied under invited us to his home and served us really good wines, the best Burgundies.
He
And we
actually
said,
did
"Hey."
a blind tasting. We'd never been in a blind tasting before, and they were all white Burgundies. It was phenomenal. While we were getting ready to go to South Dakota, we splurged one night, and Joe and I went out to dinner at La Bourguignon, at a restaurant in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and we had a bottle of 69 Le Moussigny. And you know, from then on, it's like, okay, I think it's Pinot Noir.
So that was really
really
a direction toward Pinot.
absolutely.
And then I think when we looked around here and said, well, what are people planting? It was obvious. It was, at that time, it was Pinot Noir and Chardonnay.
You finish your public health service gig in South Dakota.
Yes.
You come back to Hood River. You start looking there. Did you start hearing about what was going on in the Willamette Valley? How did you come 70 miles west?
I think we found this property. We were looking for farm property, and at that time I was working in the emergency department at Providence Hospital on the east side of Portland.
So you were living in Hood River and commuting into Providence?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we saw this advertised in the local newspaper, property, $69,000. And we said, hey, let's go look at that.
Had you met anybody in the wine industry
Not at that point.
No. But we had been hearing, actually my dad had even been hearing about what was happening as far as people planting grapes. And so, you know, we've been hearing rumors about, okay, these people coming up from California and planting grapes, and sounded pretty good.
And so, Dave, when we came here to look at the property, we were at the head of the driveway, and we looked down and we said, this is it. That day, we negotiated a contract to buy this property, $500 down and $2,000 a month. And I had a really good job in the ER. I mean, I was making good money.
Yeah.
And so that's...
Plus, we were willing to live in an 8x35 trailer house.
For a year.
Yep.
Well, I think as we're winding up this pre-time, we need to drink some of the wine that you've opened for us today,
Okay.
which is 2012 La Boheme Pinot, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
You want to tell the
Oh,
story?
well, so what we did, we wanted to plant this in 1985, and so we took cuttings from all of our best vines in the upper field over there, and we had them propagated and rooted, and then we planted the La Boheme field.
you find the property, 1973, right?
Right.
And
Right.
you move a trailer here. And it was the two of you and your two sons.
No, they were living in
they
Sweden.
They were still in Sweden, okay.
But they would come
in the summer.
In the summers.
Okay. Eartha's the oldest, right?
Right.
And when was she born?
She was born in '68.
So you already had Eartha
Eartha.
and Adam at that point.
Yeah, they were both, Adam was born in South Dakota, and then Eartha was a year old when we moved to South Dakota.
Dave, I delivered Adam in South Dakota.
He did a good job too.
Yeah, I did a good job. I said, here's a winemaker.
And Anna was born sometime after that.
Yes,
Yeah.
in McMinnville.
Yeah. Pretty quickly you started building a house, and I assume that you did a lot of that work yourselves.
Yeah, we did. We did it all. Pretty much.
Well, we did the framing,
Yeah.
the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, and the sheetrock. I mean, it was all very exciting because it was all things that
They
were
were all
new
things
to
that were
us.
new to us. Some of our kids' best memories are from that house. And we did learn enough to be able to turn an old barn into our first winery. You know, 77 was, for us, I think, a pretty disastrous vintage, our first vintage.
It was probably the coolest summer we've ever had.
But then 78, 79 were really good for us.
Yeah.
And by that time, we had been to France, read everything we could about winemaking. Pat, of course, had a great background in farming, and I had a good background in chemistry. And so, you know, things fit together.
I think the best thing we did in 77 was to buy French oak barrels from your friend Becky Wasserman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was really, really wonderful to have such good oak. And then we realized, okay, the wine's a little thin, but at least we have really good oak. And of course, oak has been a major part of our winemaking ever since then, for the Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
76, we worked at Tualatin Vineyards and helped them with their harvest some, because they were right up the hill from us, and that was a good learning experience. And that was after our trip to Champagne and Burgundy, which we ended up picking grapes in Champagne and then visiting some wonderful people in Burgundy and seeing what they did there. And I think that's when we really started getting the idea, okay, we need to sort of emulate Burgundy. And that's when we decided that even early on in our winemaking, we started making single vineyard wines because we knew that the site was so important for giving the wine the character. And so in 1979, we made wines from 3 different soil types, 3 different vineyards. Dundee Hills Vineyard, Wind Hill Vineyard, and then our own vineyard.
Bowers,
Yeah.
right.
And so we purchased grapes from those growers. How many years?
For probably 25 years. 25 for Wind Hill and probably 20 for
And they became
Dundee.
some of our very, very best friends.
Right away, we started doing, special events at our old building there, and we did what we called the Riesling Festival, and then later on, when we had the newer facility, we did jazz festivals on Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day weekend. So we tried to go to the public as much as possible. The other thing I'd like to say about the role of women in wine in our early industry is that so many of the women worked so hard, not just on marketing, but they worked in the vineyards and they worked in the wineries. And I've always been pleased that Joe has always given me half credit for the winemaking that I was responsible for. And one of the things that really helped me was we took a trip to California, and the purpose was to go visit with Mary Edwards and Zelma Long. Because at that time, they were the only 2 women winemakers almost in the whole world. But then now you look across the world and then like, oh my gosh.
No, I mean, it's a very different world.
You know how there's warning labels, of course, on wine, like there is on tobacco. And we always thought, well, what about the healthful aspects of wine? So for a few years, at the bottom of our label, it said, Joe Campbell, MD, winemaker. And I think you're the one that thought that would help our marketing.
Yeah,
and
I did.
I really resisted it. And I thought, okay, for marketing, I guess I can agree to that. But I never
I kind of
liked
wish
that.
I never would have done it too.
Yeah, I know, you did it. Yeah, but it was for that reason.
It was for marketing.
We never had a other winemaker.
Yeah.
We brought Adam on
Yeah.
and taught him for 5 years before he took over. But we never had a vineyard manager, a winemaker other than us. And I don't know if any other wineries did that.
No. I think the example that you presented to, in essence, the world of a co-management is pretty unique. And even today, that almost doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of this. It says 1979 Pinot Noir, Willamette Valley, Pat and Joe Campbell winemakers.
Yeah.
So
That's a pretty profound statement, in fact.
yeah, I was very proud of it.
Yeah. One of the things that's amazing in the wine industry is that there is a second generation that was brought up, scared to death, and yet has really taken over. And it's not just Elk Cove, of course, but
No.
Adam's got to have been one of the first, and certainly taken...
Louis Ponzi,
Yeah.
probably right about the same time.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
But Adam has really taken Elk Cove, and really, it's really his in a sense, and even as he's honoring what the two of you have done, but he's really grabbed it and is really made it ever more successful. Did you consciously think about what would happen to Elk Cove as you grew older?
David, I don't think I did. I think that after the two of us worked with Adam for 5 years, we just had confidence in him that we could walk away and that we needed to walk away and to let him really take control. And we just had total confidence that he would do that. And
I mean, he wasn't, prior to those 5 years, he wasn't going to do it. Right?
no, he graduated in political science. We thought he was going to be a lawyer. And he didn't.
Yeah.
But he came to us and he said, I want to be a winemaker.
Yeah, and it was one of the happiest days of our lives because by that time we were getting pretty tired.
You know, we ended up doing this for 20 years. And Adam actually is, I think it's on his 21st year.
Yeah, we did it for 21 and now he's 21.
21?
Yeah.
And then we're so thankful that Anna joined us and does all of our social media, incredible photography.
Yep.
A lot of our marketing.
You know, our marketing online now. I mean,
We quickly got wind of Irving and Company, who has done a lot of the bookkeeping for a lot of the wineries. And that was one of the things that Jack said to us is how important it was going to be for us to empower Adam and give him half ownership. Yet at the same time, we have a great crew. We have our vineyard manager's been with us for over 20 years. Our assistant winemaker for, was it 18 years, Anna?
Wow.
And then of course Adam for way more than that. And that provides real kind of comfort and consistency to what we're
And a
doing.
historical knowledge of how
Yeah.
you do things, yeah. I'm going to take this opportunity to do one more toast, but for
Let's do that.
doing so many things correctly, congratulations
Thank you.
to you.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, and congratulations on 50 years. That's wonderful.
wow.
Thank you.